Okay, picture this. A major hospital system just grinds to a halt. Surgeries get canceled, patient care is, you know, severely disrupted.
Yeah, terrible stuff.
And it's not because of some natural disaster, right? It's a cyber attack exploiting software vulnerabilities.
It's a really stark reminder, isn't it, as we weave technology into, well, everything.
Critical infrastructure, our
Hmm.
personal data, everything. The security of that software has just never been more critical.
Absolutely. We're really at a point where insecure software isn't just some technical glitch anymore. It's uh, a tangible risk.
To our physical safety, economic stability.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
everything's so interconnected. A single weakness in one piece of software can ripple outwards, have devastating consequences.
And that is precisely what we are digging into today. We're going to try and sidestep the super technical jargon for a bit.
Right. Keep it accessible.
We want to unpack the core ideas behind building software that's secure right from the start, what people call secure by design. Now, our roadmap for this deep dive, it comes from this powerhouse group. Seriously, multiple international cybersecurity organizations.
Yeah, you've got CISA, the NSA, FBI in the U.S.
And their counterparts, Australia, Canada, UK, Germany, Israel, Japan, New Zealand. Lots of them. It's a major international effort.
The collective brain power is pretty impressive.
So our goal here is to give you the essential understanding of why this whole thing matters. Whether you're, say, prepping for a meeting, trying to stay current in your field.
Or maybe you're just curious.
Exactly. We're aiming for those light bulb moments, without getting totally bogged down.
Yeah, our mission is really to pull out the key insights from this global consensus document. We want to give you a clear picture of how we can fundamentally improve software security.
Shifting away from just reacting all the time.
Precisely. Moving away from that endless cycle of patching.
Okay, so let's get into some basics first. You're going to hear these two terms a lot.
Mm.
Secure by design and secure by default.
Right. Key concepts.
So secure by design, basically, it means weaving security right into the product from the very first planning stages. It's not like an afterthought.
It's baked in from the beginning. Part of its DNA, as you said.
And then secure by default kind of takes it a step further. It means the product is secure the moment you get it with minimal fiddling around needed.
You don't need a manual the size of a phone book just to lock it down.
And what's interesting is that secure by design is sort of the big idea, the philosophy.
And secure by default is a crucial way you actually make that philosophy happen. It's nested within it, really.
Can you give us an analogy, maybe?
Sure. Think about building like a fortress. Secure by design is making sure the blueprint includes strong foundations, thick walls, good gate placement, structurally sound from the start.
Okay.
Then secure by default is like ensuring all the gates are locked, the guards are posted, the drawbridge is up the moment construction finishes. No extra steps needed to make it initially secure.
Got it. And this really gets to the core problem that secure by design aims to fix. Historically, the software world, well, it's relied a lot on fixing security holes after the product's already out there.
Right. Post-deployment patching.
Which means this never-ending cycle of updates, patches, and frankly, a huge burden on you, the customer, to keep yourself safe.
And that model, it just isn't sustainable anymore. It's like playing whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Totally.
You fix one vulnerability, another one pops up somewhere else. It's inefficient, and it leaves customers exposed, especially, smaller organizations or individuals who don't have huge IT teams.
So the fundamental shift, the big idea here, is moving that responsibility.
Yes.
Instead of you, the customer, needing to be the security expert, constantly patching and configuring, the onus shifts to the software manufacturers themselves.
Exactly. They built it. They should be primarily responsible for its safety.
And to help guide this shift, this international guide we're drawing from, it lays out 3 core principles for these manufacturers.
3 big ones.
First, take ownership of customer security outcomes.
What?
Second, embrace radical transparency and accountability.
Radical. We'll get into that.
And third, this whole commitment has to lead from the top within their own companies.
These 3 principles, they're really the foundation for a more proactive and ultimately a much more effective approach to software security.
It moves security from being like an optional extra
To being absolutely fundamental to how software gets made and maintained. It's about quality, really.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to pull out the most crucial insights from these principles and the practical recommendations that go with them.
We want to give you a clearer understanding of how we can all move towards a future where the tech we use is just inherently safer.
Okay, let's dive into that first principle then. Take ownership of customer security outcomes. What does that actually look like for a software company?
Well, at its core, it means software companies need to fundamentally change how they view their role. They can't just, toss features over the wall and hope for the best. They have to recognize their products operate in a risky world, and they need to proactively invest in making them resilient right from the start.
Okay, so we're talking about baking in security, as the guide says, not bolting it on afterwards. That makes intuitive sense.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between a car maker building crumple zones into the frame versus just, I don't know, selling you airbags separately.
Exactly. So what does baking in look like? The guide points to several key technical areas. One big one is application hardening,
Hardening, making it tougher.
making it much tougher for attackers to exploit. This includes things like rigorously checking and cleaning any data user's input, preventing malicious code injection.
Parameterized queries, they mentioned.
Yes, that's a specific technique for that. Crucial. Another vital part is using memory-saved programming languages.
Okay, why are they so important?
Well, some languages, just by their nature, make it much harder for programmers to make certain common errors. Errors that hackers love to exploit to, take control of a system.
Ah,
So choosing safer languages right from the start can literally eliminate entire categories of vulnerabilities. It's a huge win.
wow. So the very foundation matters. What else comes under this hardening umbrella?
They also stress having a really rigorous software development lifecycle, or SDLC. That means building security checks into every single stage.
From the initial idea all the way to release and updates?
Exactly. And another example they give is using hardware-backed cryptography, basically using secure chips to protect really sensitive digital keys. Makes them much harder to steal.
Okay, so those are the sort of behind-the-scenes technical things. What about security features that, you as a user might actually see or interact with?
Right, those are important too. The guide calls these security features, and it lists several critical ones you've probably seen,
Like,
like using TLS, that little padlock in your browser that encrypts your connection, supporting single sign-on, SSO, so you don't need 50 different passwords for work apps,
definitely useful.
and requiring multi-factor authentication, MFA. That's when you need your password and maybe a code from your phone.
Yeah, that second layer.
Right, an extra layer of security. Other important ones are good security event audit logging, keeping track of who did what when, and using things like role-based access control, RBAC, or attribute-based access control, ABAC, to strictly manage user permissions.
Okay, lots of acronyms there, but they're about controlling access.
Exactly. But here's the absolute key insight from the guide on these features. Secure default settings.
Meaning they should be on and secure right away.
Precisely. They shouldn't require the user to be a security guru to turn them on or configure them correctly. The default state should be the secure state. That shifts the burden massively.
That makes so much sense. A brilliant security feature is, well, useless if it's off by default and buried in menus.
Totally.
But this ownership principle, it goes beyond just building features, right? It's about the actual impact on the customer's security.
It's exactly right. Software companies shouldn't just measure success by how many security features they've ticked off a list.
Yeah.
The real metric is, are their customers actually safer because they're using this product? That's why the focus shifts to customer security outcomes.
And this brings us back to that frustrating patching issue. The guide says fixing individual bugs one by one feels like, well, a losing battle sometimes.
It really can be. When you're just reacting, patching one specific vulnerability, you often miss the underlying root cause.
Right.
The guide uses a good example. You might fix one specific way malicious data gets injected, but then attackers just find a slightly different way in another part of the code.
So you haven't solved the fundamental problem.
Exactly. The much more effective approach is to unify the underlying code base, find those systemic weaknesses, and eliminate entire classes of vulnerabilities at the source.
Tackle the root cause, not just the symptoms.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that new features, while great, can also bring new risks. How does that tie into taking ownership?
Well, the guide explains that integration features, connecting software to other systems, can add a lot of value.
But,
There's always a but.
yeah. They can also introduce risks if they support older, less secure communication methods, maybe for backward compatibility, without a clear plan to phase them out.
So customers might unknowingly keep using the risky old way.
Exactly. And similarly, default settings chosen purely for ease of use might turn on features or protocols that aren't strictly necessary, unintentionally making the attack surface bigger.
It sounds like a constant tension between usability, features, and security. Now, the guide also talks about hardening guides. These have been standard practice for a while. What's the issue with relying on them?
Yeah, hardening guides those instruction manuals, telling customers how to manually tweak settings for better security. They have some pretty big drawbacks.
Such as?
Well, for starters, they can be hard to find. They're often out of date. Implementing the steps can be really complex, sometimes even needing custom scripts or code.
Not exactly user-friendly. Not at all. And they usually assume the user has a lot of security expertise, which often isn't the case. Plus, even if you follow the guide perfectly, it might not actually be effective if the guide itself wasn't based on a realistic understanding of current threats.
So basically, expecting every customer to find, understand, and correctly implement a complex hardening guide, it just doesn't scale.
Not even close. Think about millions of customers, countless software installs, often with limited IT resources. It's impossible. The guide really pushes that the manufacturer needs to continuously evaluate their products' security posture defaults and configurations against the real-world threat landscape.
Which leads to this really interesting idea in the guide. Built-in nudges, like a seatbelt chime.
Exactly like that. These are alerts or indicators right inside the product. They proactively tell administrators, hey, you might have a security risk here.
Like MFA isn't turned on for admins.
Precisely. Or you're still using this old insecure protocol. And crucially, these nudges shouldn't just flag the problem. They should provide clear steps or links to resources on how to fix it.
Making security more intuitive.
Yes, less reliant on hunting down external manuals. More like a helpful co-pilot.
I like that. The guide also has this really punchy line. The software industry needs more secure products, not more security products. That sums up this ownership idea pretty well, huh?
It really does. It's a call for software companies to focus on building inherent security into their core offerings, rather than just assuming customers will layer on lots of extra security tools to compensate for fundamentally weak software.
And what if a customer does get breached? How does this ownership principle apply after the fact?
That's a great question. The guide suggests that in that scenario, the manufacturer has a responsibility. They should analyze if their own security features or their hardening guidance, if it had been followed, would have actually prevented that specific attack.
Okay.
And if the answer is no, or if it's clear the guidance wasn't practical, they should seriously consider making those necessary preventative measures the default setting for everyone, often, at no extra cost.
And be open about it.
Yes, and be transparent about how they're addressing the root cause of the exploited vulnerability to stop it happening again. It's about learning and improving the product for all users.
So it's not just, well, you didn't configure it right, but how can we make this inherently safer? The last point under this principle is about objective measurement and reporting. Why is that key?
To truly own customer security outcomes, it's not enough for companies just to talk about their internal security efforts. They need to actually measure how effective their security features and configurations are in the real world for their customers.
Okay.
And they need to report on these metrics regularly. Importantly, the guide also suggests sharing anonymized data with the broader security research community. This helps everyone track progress and understand security trends across the industry.
Okay, that covers the why of taking ownership. Now let's get into some of the how. The guide lists specific secure by default practices that really demonstrate this principle. First one seems obvious, but it's still a huge issue. Getting rid of default passwords.
It's amazing it's still a thing, right? But yeah, default passwords are a massive, easily exploited weakness. The recommendation is crystal clear. Manufacturers should either force users to create strong, unique passwords during setup, or ship products with unique, strong, randomly generated passwords for each individual device or installation right out of the box. No more admin password.
Thank goodness. Okay, next practice. Conduct field tests. Sounds like user testing, but for security.
Pretty much. It's about going beyond the lab and seeing how customers actually deploy and use the software in their real environments. How usable are the security features? Where do people struggle?
Finding the friction points.
Exactly. The guide even suggests partnering with customers for simulated attacks, red team exercises, to really pressure test the product's resilience against realistic threats.
Very proactive. Now, we talked about the problems with those big hardening guides. What are the secure by default practices related to them?
Right. The goal here is to dramatically reduce the reliance on those guides. You do that by building the most critical security controls directly into the software's default settings.
So less manual work for the customer?
Way less. Focus the guide, if you still need one, on the absolute top risks, maybe for new scenarios. Provide tools or automation within the product to implement key controls. The guide mentions the Pareto principle,
Yeah.
the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Make the common 80% of use cases secure and simple by default. Offer targeted guidance for the complex 20%. The key is nudging admins towards security within the product interface.
So ideally, those huge guides shrink or disappear. Another practice, actively discouraging unsafe legacy features. This must be tricky, balancing security with backward compatibility.
It is tricky, but the guide argues security has to take priority. The recommendation is to focus energy on making upgrade paths to secure versions really smooth and easy, rather than clinging to old, vulnerable features forever.
How do they encourage upgrades?
Be really clear about the security benefits of moving. Announce deprecation timelines well in advance. And importantly, use those in-product nudges we talked about to prompt users directly. Hey, this feature you're using is old and risky. Here's how to move to the new, safer version.
Actively steer people away from danger zones.
Okay, and the last set of practices here involves those attention-grabbing alerts. We mentioned nudges earlier.
Yes, these need to be effective. When a system is in an unsafe state, maybe using a deprecated protocol or admin accounts lack MFA, the alerts need to be timely, maybe even persistent.
Annoying, but in a good way.
Kind of. They need to clearly explain the risk and ideally require the admin to acknowledge it, maybe even explain why they're not fixing it yet. But you have to balance it so you don't cause alert fatigue.
True. Too many warnings get ignored.
Right. The guide even floats the idea of temporarily limiting high-risk functions until security is improved. And the final practice mentioned is creating secure configuration templates.
Like preset security profiles. Exactly. Tailored for different risk appetites, maybe standard security, high security. This lets organizations quickly apply a whole set of secure settings without tweaking dozens of options individually.
Making security easier to adopt.
Much easier. And then, instead of a hardening guide, you might have a loosening guide, which we can talk more about later.
Okay, fascinating. That's a really solid look at Principle 1. Taking ownership. Let's move to the second one. Embrace radical transparency and accountability. That word radical definitely jumps out. What's that about?
Yeah, radical is definitely intentional there. This principle is pushing for a much, much higher level of openness from software companies about their security practices, about the security posture of their products.
Why? What's the goal?
The core idea is that by being way more transparent, companies can build trust. They can actually use security as a competitive differentiator.
Like, we're proud of how secure our stuff is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this transparency can help lift the entire software industry towards better security standards for everyone.
Okay, but isn't there a worry that being too open gives attackers a roadmap? Here are our weaknesses.
That's the classic counter-argument, yeah. But the guide addresses it head-on. It says the overwhelming evidence shows attackers are already really effective, even without detailed internal blueprints.
Yeah.
They find ways.
Right.
And the benefits of transparency for the defenders, it's the customers, the security community, even other software companies, those benefits vastly outweigh the potential risks.
How so?
Well, transparency helps establish and evolve industry best practices. It lets companies with fewer resources learn from those who are further ahead. It forces security to be considered earlier in development, because you'll have to talk about it later, and it builds accountability.
Okay, so it's about creating a shared learning environment, raising the tide for all boats. What does this radical transparency actually look like? Where's the gap now?
The guide points out that currently there's often very little detailed public info about how software is actually developed and maintained from a security perspective. We don't often see companies publishing deep dives into their design choices or metrics on how effective their secure development processes are against real attacks. The goal of radical transparency is to share more strategies, maybe even costs associated with security flaws, plans for wiping out whole classes of vulnerabilities, moving beyond just incremental improvements.
It sounds like shifting from a culture where security practices are like trade secrets.
To one where sharing, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable initially, is seen as beneficial for the whole ecosystem.
What are the specific benefits for, say, you, the customer, or maybe for investors looking at these software companies?
For you, the customer, this kind of transparency gives you way more than just a feature list and a price. It lets you make informed buying decisions based on a company's demonstrated commitment to security, not just marketing claims.
You can see the proof.
Right. And for investors, it provides a clearer picture of potential risks and the company's long-term resilience. And, if a breach does happen somewhere,
Which unfortunately does.
transparency about what went wrong and how it's being fixed helps everyone else learn and hopefully avoid the same fate.
Builds trust through openness, gives people the info they need. Okay, so how can companies show this transparency? Let's start with those secure by default practices we talked about.
Okay, the guide gives concrete examples. One is publishing aggregate security stats and trends.
When what?
Like what percentage of their customers' admins have actually enabled MFA? Or how many are still using that risky old protocol we mentioned? Sharing that kind of data gives a real sense of the product's security posture in the wild.
Interesting. What else?
Publish patching statistics. What percentage of customers are on the latest, most secure version? What are they doing to make updating easier? And also publish data on unused privileges.
Unused privileges, like people having more access than they need.
Exactly. Sharing aggregate data on how common that is and what the company is doing in the product guidance, software changes to help customers reduce that attack surface.
Those metrics would paint a pretty clear picture of a vendor's commitment. What about transparency around how they actually build the software securely?
Yeah, this gets more technical. First, they should establish and share info about their own internal security controls, especially for cloud providers. Things like, are their own staff using strong MFA when accessing sensitive systems?
Eating their own dog food, basically.
Kinda, yeah. Second, publish high-level threat models. Basically, explain what they're trying to protect, who they think the attackers are, across their own systems, their development pipeline, and the customer's environment.
Gives you insight into their security thinking.
Definitely. Third, publish detailed self-attestations about their secure software development lifecycle, SDLC, saying, okay, we follow the NIST SSDF framework, and here's specifically which controls we've implemented for this product.
Shows adherence to recognized standards.
Right. Then there's embracing vulnerability transparency. This is a big one. Commit to publishing complete, accurate CVE entries, those public vulnerability records, including the root cause, the CWE.
And they make the point that a higher CVE count initially might actually be a good sign.
Counterintuitive, but yes. It could mean they're being more thorough in finding and disclosing issues. They should also publish analyses of past bugs and explain the systemic fixes they've put in place to prevent recurrence.
That depth of info would be super valuable. What about the supply chain? That's a huge topic now.
Huge. So the guide strongly pushes for publishing software bills of materials, SBOMs. Companies need to know what's in their software, get that info from their suppliers, and make it available to customers.
So you know what ingredients are in the cake.
Pretty much. And this needs to cover software, firmware and devices, even AI models and data. Finally, publish a clear vulnerability disclosure policy, VDP.
What does that involve?
It tells security researchers how to report bugs, gives them legal safe harbor for responsible testing, and sets timelines for public disclosure. Crucially, it should also state the company's commitment to root cause analysis and fixing entire classes of bugs.
So, being open about components, flaws, and how they're fixing things. The last transparency area is about pro-security business practices. What does that mean?
This is about embedding security into the company's core operations, a key recommendation. Publicly name a senior executive sponsor for the Secure by Design program.
Puts a face and accountability to it at a high level.
Exactly. It signals this isn't just a tech team thing, it's a business priority. Another is to publish a Secure by Design roadmap.
Laying out their plans.
Yes, showing the plan changes to their development lifecycle, sharing results from those field tests, detailing efforts to kill off vulnerability classes. Publishing this roadmap and regular progress reports builds trust and can spur others to do the same.
Shows commitment and direction. What else?
They also recommend publishing a memory safety roadmap. Specific plans for moving to safer languages, protecting legacy code, updating internal processes, contributing to open source memory safety efforts, and finally, just publish the results.
The good and the bad.
Both. Share successes, but also talk about roadblocks and challenges encountered on the journey to being secure by design. That kind of honesty helps the whole industry learn.
Wow, okay. That level of openness in development and business practices really does sound radical compared to how things often are now. Moving security from secrets to shared knowledge. Let's get to the third and final principle. Lead from the top. Seems straightforward, but what are the key takeaways?
Well, it might sound obvious, but it's absolutely critical. Real, lasting commitment to customer safety has to start at the very top of the company. It can't just be delegated down to the tech teams.
It needs to be a core business goal.
Yes, driven by leadership. They set the vision, they create the incentives, they foster that security-first culture across the whole organization.
So it's more than just executives buying in, as the guide says. It's about them actively managing security as a business priority.
Exactly. The guide really emphasizes treating security and product quality as essential business functions, not just technical ones. When leadership drives it like that, the whole organization responds more effectively, more efficiently to customer security needs.
They even introduced this idea of corporate cyber responsibility, CCR.
Yeah, drawing a parallel to corporate social responsibility, CSR. The idea is that company boards need to take a much more active role in guiding and overseeing cybersecurity programs, just like they do with environmental or social initiatives.
Treating cyber risk with the same gravity at the board level, the guide quotes the quality guru J.M. Duran, too, about management taking personal charge of quality. How does that apply here?
The parallel is direct. Just like Duran argued you can't achieve high quality unless top management is personally driving it, the same holds true for security. Leaders need to champion secure by design, be actively involved. Without that top-down commitment, you're unlikely to see real systemic change.
Makes sense. So how can companies show they're leading from the top? The guide gives several concrete actions.
One really powerful one, especially for public companies, is to include details about their Secure by Design program right in their corporate financial reports.
In the annual report, alongside the financials.
Exactly. The guide compares it to the auto industry, where safety performance is often highlighted in annual reports. Doing this sends a clear signal to investors, customers, everyone, that the company links customer security directly to its business success and value. It's not just marketing fluff.
That would definitely make a statement. What else can leadership do?
Another key thing is for leaders to ensure regular reports on product security and its impact on customer security go directly to the board of directors.
Not just the usual COSO update on internal security.
Right. This needs to be specifically about how the products themselves are getting safer and reducing risk for customers. And the board should be asking for this info from management beyond just the CSO.
Making product security a standing agenda item at the highest level. The guide also talks about empowering a dedicated Secure by Design executive. Why is that role important?
Yeah, they draw a really important distinction here. It's not just about executive buy-in, where a leader nods and agrees security is important.
Right.
It's about having business leaders actively manage customer security improvement using normal business processes. You need someone, an executive, maybe a team, who is genuinely empowered. They need the authority, the resources, the clout to actually influence product investment decisions and drive these security initiatives across different parts of the company.
Giving them real teeth to make change happen. What about incentives? How can leadership use those to build the culture?
This is crucial. The guide says align the company's reward systems across all relevant departments, product, engineering, support, even sales, to encourage actions that improve customer security.
Oh.
Weave it into hiring criteria, promotions, salary reviews, bonuses, stock options. Put improving customer security right alongside other performance metrics. The goal is to make everyone feel responsible for and rewarded for contributing to customer safety.
Tie security directly to career success. Makes sense. They also suggest creating a Secure by Design council. What's that for?
Think of it like the central quality councils you see in manufacturing or other industries. This council would have representatives from different divisions or business units.
Uh-huh.
Their job is to drive security improvements across the board, ensuring everyone's pulling in the same direction, aligned with the top-level goals set by leadership. It's a way to share best practices, track progress, and integrate security into decision-making everywhere.
And the last suggestion under leadership is about customer councils, focusing specifically on security.
Right. Many companies have customer advisory boards already, maybe for product feedback or marketing. The idea here is to deliberately structure agendas for these councils to tackle customer safety and the security of the products as they're actually used.
Getting direct feedback on security challenges.
Exactly. And thinking carefully about who's on the council, how it reports, to make sure you get truly actionable insights about deployed product security. That empowered Secure by Design exec should be heavily involved, ensuring this feedback loops right back into the company's plans.
Actively listen to the customer on security. Use that to improve. Okay, that really clarifies the 3 core principles and how manufacturers can live them. Now, the guide also has a section with more specific secure by design and secure by default tactics, more technical details.
Yeah, this part gets into more the nitty-gritty, the concrete tools and techniques that underpin those principles. For secure by design tactics, it hammers home again the importance of memory-safe languages.
C Sharp, Rust, Java, Go, Swift.
Right. And some mitigations for older CC++ code, like fuzzing or using things like ASLR or CFI. It mentions secure hardware foundations like TPMs or HSMs.
Right.
Using secure software components, vetting libraries, contributing security fixes back to open source, using web template frameworks that automatically handle things like input escaping.
Helps prevent common web attacks.
Definitely. Using parameterized queries to stop SQL injection, employing SAST and static and dynamic analysis tools to automatically check code and running applications.
Complements manual testing.
Yes, good code review processes,
Yeah.
generating those SBMs, having robust vulnerability disclosure programs with Safe Harbor, ensuring CVEs are complete, including the root cause, CWE, using defense in depth like sandboxing and minimal privileges, and aiming to meet recognized cybersecurity performance goals, CPGs.
Wow, that's a dense list of technical best practices for the development process itself.
Yeah.
What about the secure by default tactics listed here? Do they overlap with the practices we discussed?
And build on them, yeah. Getting more specific, again, eliminating default passwords, mandating MFA for privileged users, making it opt-out, not opt-in, providing SSO via open standards like SAML or OIDC, and crucially, at no extra charge.
Don't charge extra for basic security.
Exactly. Providing secure logging, by default, high-quality audit logs,
Okay.
standard formats like UTC, good documentation, easy SIEM integration, again, no extra charge. Defining a recommended software authorization profile, clear roles, warnings if you deviate.
Makes sense.
Prioritizing forward-looking security over backward compatibility, empowering the removal of old, insecure stuff. Actively working to track and reduce the size of those hardening guides by baking the advice into the defaults. And always considering the user experience impact of security settings, aiming for defaults that are secure and usable without complex configuration.
It really reinforces that shift away from relying on users to figure out complex hardening guides and towards making security the easy, standard option. Which brings us to loosening guides. Explain that again.
Right. So the traditional hardening guide says, here's how to make our product more secure, which, as we discussed, has problems. It can highlight weaknesses, and people often don't use them correctly anyway. The shift is to secure by default, where it's secure out of the box. Then, instead of a hardening guide, you provide a loosening guide. This guide says, okay, the default is secure. If you choose to turn off the security setting, here are the specific business risks you are accepting.
Ah, so it frames reducing security as an explicit risk decision.
Exactly. It puts the onus on justifying the reduction in security and explains the potential consequences in plain language that business leaders can understand. Much better than hoping users will proactively increase security through complex steps.
That makes a lot more sense. Now, finally, the guide doesn't just talk to manufacturers. It has recommendations for us, the customers. What's our role in pushing this forward?
It's a huge role. We as customers need to drive demand. We need to hold our vendors accountable. That means prioritizing secure by design and default when we buy software.
Make it a key purchasing criterion.
Absolutely. Empower our IT teams to really scrutinize security before buying and back them up if they say a product isn't secure enough. Develop clear purchasing policies that demand these principles. And if a decision is made to accept a security risk with a product,
Document it.
yes, formally document that risk acceptance. Make sure senior execs sign off and the board reviews it periodically. Don't just sweep risks under the rug.
Make security part of the formal procurement and risk management process. What else can we do?
Adequately fund our own critical IT security services. Build strategic relationships with key suppliers. Talk openly about security needs and priorities. Expect and demand transparency from vendors about their security posture and roadmaps.
Use our purchasing power.
Right. Collaborate with peers. Talk to other organizations in your industry. Which vendors are doing well on secure design, which aren't? Share that information. Collectively push manufacturers. And finally, especially with cloud services, understand the shared responsibility model and choose providers who are transparent about their part.
It really feels like a partnership is needed. Manufacturers need to build securely, and customers need to demand it and verify it.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. When customers make security a priority in their purchasing, it creates a powerful market incentive for vendors to invest in secure by design and default. We can really drive change.
Well, this has been incredibly enlightening, a really deep dive into secure by design principles. It seems crystal clear that this shift building security in early, making it the default, is just essential if we want a safer digital world.
Yeah, reducing that burden on everyone.
That core message, it really comes through, changing who holds the primary responsibility for security, moving it upstream to the manufacturers.
Exactly. By truly embracing those three principles, ownership, transparency, and top-down leadership,
Mm.
we can hopefully break that endless patch cycle and move towards technology that's just inherently more trustworthy.
And it needs action from both sides.
Sustained action from vendors
Mhm.
and informed demanding choices from customers.
So, for you listening, whether you're actually developing software or you're a business leader choosing tech, or honestly just anyone using technology day to day, I really encourage you to think about these
Well,
principles.
yeah, how do they apply in your world?
And if you are involved in buying software, start asking those questions. Ask vendors about their secure by design practices. Ask for their SBOMs. Ask about their MFA adoption rates. Those questions, repeated often enough, are what will drive real change.
Couldn't agree more. And maybe, as a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, what would a world truly secure by design and default actually feel like? How would our daily interaction with technology change? And, perhaps more importantly, what are the biggest hurdles still standing in our way to get there?
That is a great question to ponder. If you want to dig even deeper, you can find the original comprehensive document this is based on. Just look for the CISA Secure by Design publication, co-authored by the NSA, FBI, and all those international partners we mentioned. Definitely worth exploring further if this topic interests you.